Hong, Dr. Alejandra Hong, Director of the USC Student Success Initiative. You might know a little something about education. Colonel Jack Jacobs just mentioned a few things. Is there something you would like to add about education based on your experience over there at that little school called USC?
Yeah. My gosh, the pressure.
Stand up, please.
Yes, absolutely. So we're working mostly with our student veteran population and that transition to their careers. And most of our students are transfer students. And so we're finding that they come to USC, they come into our higher education institutions with a whole career behind them, and a new career that they're going into most of the time. And what we're finding is that our students are struggling to translate that experience. They're struggling to say, these are the skills that I've learned, this is what I've already done, and this is what's going to take me forward. So that's something that we really try to focus on in our space, is connecting them to that language and to that lexicon of what is next, and how do I really sell myself, and how do I advocate for myself.
Thank you. Corman, Janine Williams. No, I thought you were. What did you do? No, I know. What did you do?
I was human resources specialist, and then when I was overseas in Iraq, I drove about 6,000 miles across the country. So.
Well, right now, I know what you do, and that's run the Student Veteran Resource Center. So what kind of issues are you seeing in our educational system or with our students? What are some of the big things that you could share with us?
I think some of the biggest issues that I'm seeing is our students are coming into the university unaware of the benefits that they have access to. So for instance, a lot of our students are recently learning about the Vocational Readiness and Employment Program, or also known as VRE. For us older folks, it's also known as Voc Rehab. But if they're coming into USC, they're using our post 9/11 GI Bill. Great program. But a lot of our students are disabled veterans. They're 100%. They're coming in with PTSD or any other type of disabilities. And a lot of them don't know that they have access to VRE. This is an incredible program, but for USC, it is a private institution. So unfortunately, I can't talk about the public institution. I did graduate from a public university, but here at USC, it's private. And the thing that we're seeing is our vocational rehab counselors or our VRE counselors aren't telling them or letting them know that they can come to schools like USC that are private institutions to get some of the best resources that they can get, whether that's student accessibility through the disability office, career counseling, other resources like that USC has access to. And so I think just trying to really let our younger generation know that, yes, if you have a 20% disability, you can access VRE, you can come to USC or any other institution. But I think that's the biggest hurdle. And then I think the second issue or challenge that I see is a lot of our students don't know that they have access to disability accommodations. So if they're coming out of the military, whether that's anxiety or some sort of like depression, that's a huge challenge when it comes to adding academia to your disability. And so I think one of our biggest hurdles and our challenges is that we're really spreading the word about, at USC we have the Office of Student Accessibility Services, and so they're able to get extended time, but these are accommodations that you can get at community colleges, 2 years, 4 years, public, private. I think really making sure that they know that when they're coming into higher ed that they can succeed through services like Office of Accountability, Accessibility. So that's, I would say VRE, and then of course the disability accommodations for students.
Thank you, Ms. Janine, and I've got to tell you, I already learned something. I haven't heard of half of those programs. So let's go to one of our other educational experts. That would be Corman. I know this is right. Corman, Jarek Galindez, could you please share some of your insight and wisdom regarding some of the challenges that student veterans are facing?
Absolutely. Challenges transitioning out of the service into potentially local community college or straight into higher level institutions. Specifically with the pandemic recently, that hinders a lot of potential experience that they could have had before transitioning into a higher level institution. So seeking resources in that instance will help that transition. So I'm speaking from experience. Janine has helped me. It's part of our actual veterans orientation to visit the Office of Student Accessibility Programs and meet the people there who could help us if we need. That's pretty much all I can think of right now. Thankfully, at our school, finding people to connect with is very easy. Our veterans community is very active. The veterans resources at the community colleges that I attended were also available as well, but I could totally see looking over these resources. As someone who's facing new challenges, whether academia was something always in your crosshairs or if it's something completely new, just knowing that there's people out there to help you with that next goal that you have with higher education.
Excellent, thank you. I want to go right back to Ms. Janine for 1 second. If you would just give us some numbers, please. I don't know the percentage of people that separate from the military that have their GI Bill that actually use it. I don't know what that percentage is. Maybe you do. If you'd share that, that'd be great. What I am interested, though, is USC, great school. How many veterans? What's the veteran population of USC? If you could address some of those things, I'd like some numbers, please.
So I'm not very familiar, and I don't want to spread false information about how many students have access or how many folks have access to the GI Bill. I know California has over 1 million veterans, but for USC, we have about 1,500 vets, and then we have about 2,000 dependents or folks who are military affiliated. We also have all 4 branches of the ROTC programs, so we have Navy, Army, Air Force. We also have Marines, of course. And so that's about 200 cadets that we're serving, so anywhere over 2,000 to 500. But sometimes our vets, of course, they have to self-report, so sometimes we don't know or they fall through the cracks, unfortunately. But if they fill out and they check that they're a service member, a cadet, or a veteran, then we're able to track them in our system. So currently over 2,000 military-affiliated students.
Thank you, I appreciate that. I want to conclude our education focus with Ms. Suki. No, I know that you handle the programming over there at the Veterans Center. So what I would like to ask you is, if you could wave a magic wand and just had a genie in a bottle that gave you one wish, what would your one wish be? What would the one thing that could change your world over there be?
I think, well, I'm also a student, so I can speak from the student perspective. So for next, I guess, student coming in to have this great community at USC took a lot. So when I first got there, we didn't have that many veterans. We didn't have that many engagement. We didn't have that many involvement. But then once we got support from our student affairs and like the actual university staffs, and once I built that relationship, they start helping me. That's when I got I got to work with Post 283, Post 123, like American Legions, to help me fund and build this community so I can help next generation of USC students have better community for themselves. So I think that's the most important thing that that is happening at USC. So if I have magic wand, I wanna give it to, this is very, I guess, personal in a way, but I wanna give it to like our VRC or Veterans Association, because we are trying to have more inclusive community, not just veterans, but as a dependent, I can speak that not that many dependents knows that we have Veterans Resource Center. Not that many dependents know that we can use this veterans resources. So that's something that I really want to focus on after I graduate as well, because my sister is currently going to university too, and she is utilizing the benefit, but she doesn't know about the Veterans Resource Center. So I do want to try to, I guess if I go back to the active duty military, I want to tell them, like, if you do have kids later on, please use the benefits and tell them, you know, they can get education for free. Yeah.
Excellent, thank you so much. Well, maybe we could spend a lot of time on a subject, but we have a lot of subjects to discuss, so we're going to keep flipping it around a little bit. We did mention that one of the critical issues that we need to discuss, or that we would like to discuss, is in the area of women veteran affairs. Before we conducted this, I called up a lot of my, well, I don't have many women friends, but I called up some women acquaintances that are veterans, and I asked them what some of their challenges were. They got to be pretty consistent. We're going to have Ms. Wimers talk about some of that in just a minute, but the thing that I think is a great opportunity right now is I'm just going to share that the number one thing that I kept hearing over and over and over is that there is a respect issue. It's about a woman walks into the VA hospital, and there's one woman, and there's 900 men, and they're all pawing on her, hitting on her, asking her out, and all she wanted to do is get a Band-Aid or something, right? Well, probably a little more than a Band-Aid. I'd like to ask the guy who would know more about this than anybody here, Dr. Stephen Braverman, who runs the darn facility. What are you seeing with regard to women veterans and their experience? What are you guys doing to make that experience a little bit more pleasant? Is there anything we should know about that, sir?
Sure, thanks for the opportunity to address that. So we currently take care of about 9,000 women veterans, so that's about 10% of our population. That's growing along the way. One of the things that we have done is to build women's health clinics within each of our various facilities. And in fact, one thing that's very unique, our newest healthcare facility, the Community-Based Outpatient Clinic Center in Inventura, which was named for an Air Force veteran, Captain, actually, I take that back, Navy veteran, Captain Mariner, Rosemary Bryant Mariner is the name of the clinic there. Actually has not only its own women's health clinic, but its own entrance, so that women don't have to go through that gauntlet of men in some cases. We've also tried to encourage women to be part of these women's health clinics in all of our facilities, which predominantly have women providers, but there are in some cases men providers by choice. And signs throughout the facility with the anti-harassment campaign that says things like, "Don't call me baby," or other sorts of things along the way. So women may get the respect that they deserve along the way.
May I comment?
That star says you can shut me down at any second, sir. You pop right up. You need a comment? Yes, sir, you may comment.
So I think when we look at women vets, we have to go to the root, and that's women in the military, right? And we have to go beyond that and go to the common issue of diversity, equity, and inclusion of all factions. Because what makes our military great, the reason we will defeat China is not because we have more F-35s. It's because we do something they don't do, and that's we embrace the minority concept, and we bring people in with unique and different ideas. But it's been a journey. So my mother was a nurse in training at Walter Reed Army Hospital during the Second World War. She got kind of a cool offer. She was in some local talent show, and she got a screen test in Hollywood. And so she was very excited about this, but turned it down because her job was to deploy to Europe and take care of soldiers in combat. So she was a combat Army nurse during the Second World War. At the end of the war, she met another young lieutenant, good news for me, my father, and they married. She was called in by her commander and informed that she had to resign her commission and she was no longer a nurse, because her job now was to be a captain's wife. That was her job, right? Now, we've changed that over time, but I don't think we're at the end of that journey yet. Mom was furious about that at the time. Maybe she was ahead of her time, I don't know. She later went back to nursing as a civil servant. But we can't let that happen. Now, on the other side of that coin, fairly recently, about 10 years ago at Edwards Air Force Base, the wing commander, an F-22 pilot with F-15 combat experience, was named Don Dunlop. Don was spelled D-A-W-N. She was a combat aviator, a general officer, a wing commander, and my understanding is she just retired as a 2-star. So we're breaking that glass ceiling, but I don't think, in all honesty, we're all the way through it.
Well, I think you're correct, and we will go to our Deputy Secretary of Calvet Women Affairs, Ms. Virginia Wimer. And what do you have to add to that, young lady? Is there some other critical issues facing women that we need to look at?
Sure, thank you. So I'd like to just say first and foremost that we do have a long way to go, and that the Department of Veterans Affairs has come a long way, even since I retired in 2012. Just since the 90s that women could go to the Department of Veterans Affairs for things like breast exams and pap smears. And still right now we can't go into a Department of Veterans Affairs hospital or clinic for an obstetrical exam. However, we are still making strides. And as the director said, we can now, have clinics named after women. So the VA is coming a long way, but here's what I want to say to our women veterans. It's going to take women veterans to change the VA. So we have to participate in order to make these differences, to make these changes. It's going to be up to us. And so we're going to need allies like you to help us along the way. So we're getting there. We're making those changes. And yes, the campaigns like Don't Call Me Baby and Don't Call Me Mister, those things help. They do. But there is no breach of confidence, there's no breach of trust like our brothers calling us baby and honey and asking us why we here taking appointments from real veterans. The reason why we don't participate like we should is because a lot of women veterans and those that identify as female, when she was wearing the uniform, there was a man on active duty in service that told her she wasn't a real veteran when she was wearing the uniform. She's taken that experience with her when she got out of the military. So that's why she doesn't participate, right? She's taken that experience with her. So you're right, sir. That touch point is downrange. It is when she's wearing the uniform. It is when she's on active duty that we have to say to her, you are a veteran and you do matter. Everything you do while you're wearing that uniform matters. And when you get out, your service still matters. And that VA is here for you. And the VA belongs to her as much as it belongs to him. So the VA has changed its motto. The VA has changed the way that the VA thinks. Is no longer for he who has borne the battle, but it's for all of us, to include our caregivers and our caretakers, which would include us as well. So we're making strides. We're getting there. And I believe in rainbows and unicorns. Who doesn't, right? We may not see everything they want in this lifetime, but as long as we continue to work together like this and in communities like this, and as long as women like us continue to participate, we will change. We will change the VA. And we are getting there. It's just going to take communities like this to get there.
Thank you so much for sharing that. So, interesting, one of the things that Dr. Braverman did not mention is that you just kind of brought up is that the VA recently changed their mission statement. And it used to be to support the veteran and the widow and the orphans, but they removed that and they made it all inclusive now. Whether or not that actually transpires, like you say, it's a question of participation and time. So thanks for sharing that. It looks like there are at least dials being moved, And that's all I can ever hope for. Again, the dial being moved, we get a trend going, get some momentum. I'd like to wrap up the focus on the women's veterans by asking Dr. Shad Mishad a question. And Shad Mishad runs the National Veterans Foundation. It's based over near the airport. Large facilities, got quite a few people staffing it, got that hotline and everything. When I first met Dr. Mishad, the director of the foundation, I got a lot of guests calling and asking for directions, so I had to keep that on. When I first met Dr. Mishad, the director of his foundation happened to be a nice young lady. It was a woman. And so I know that you've got a lot of experience dealing with women veterans. I know some must call your crisis hotline and whatnot. Could you just share with us what you're seeing? I have a feeling that women homeless is something that you might encounter from time to time, but I don't want to speak for you, sir. Can you tell us what you're thinking about that?
Well, first of all, being in this 52 years, I was in the 70s actually I was at the VA, the only therapist for women Vietnam vets. The problem then was women Vietnam vets were mostly nurses and support. They did not see themselves as soldiers. That was as the general was saying, it's a process. And yet they had PTSD. I mean, I worked with them in a MASH hospital. Not only was I counseling, I was in there as a medic, and I was bagging dead GIs and watching them weep or whatever, and they came back. And I could tell a lot of stories there, but over the last several decades, the DOD opened up for women to participate in all aspects of the mission. And probably the thing was the military wasn't ready about just integrating that right away. And I've testified in Congress for the Senate and Veterans Affairs Committee over and over from the 80s, 90s, and the 2000s about the fact that was one of the big issues. They didn't understand that there is a difference psychologically between men and women. 18, 17, 18-year-olds, putting them in basic training together. For several years, we had numbers like 26,000 sexual assaults in the armed forces in 1 year. So that had to tell something. I don't know who's listening there. I gave up testifying to Congress or whatever, because I think it really comes down to the women, like this woman next to me that I just met or whatever, to really organize like I did in the 70s for Vietnam vets. The fact that we were like losers, never lost a battle. It's got to start from, I think, someone like a strong woman vet that organizes women vets. I think what the director over here said about a separate entrance and stuff, those things should be automatic right now. There should be at every VA hospital a separate entrance or a place for a woman to go in, because what we get, and most of our calls are coming from veterans that had a bad experience with the VA nationwide. My nonprofit covers the whole country, and we have the first suicide hotline, so I hear everything. But what I think, like in the early 70s, I was in the first documentary for Vietnam vets, and what the VA was doing was to have an ombudsman. I'm just going to get this out. There needs to be an ombudsman at every VA facility welcoming the veteran the first time coming in there, almost hand carrying him like a mother taking her kid into the first grade school. They had one at the New Mexico Vet Center, the VA hospital, and they were welcome because it is a tough transition. I train the VPAN people in peer-to-peer. It's not easy, number one, to make that transition by just a male veteran going in and having a GS3 in the past decide whether you're going to be friendly or come in, because we get calls about being red flagged. A guy comes out, he's done 3 tours, some GS3 says something at him, and it gets nasty, he gets red flag, security comes. Those are the kind of calls we get. They're little things, and the people that have been in it as long as me have never been asked or whatever on special committees, because the VA always says, nationally, I'm not talking about the director here, oh, we do that. I went in for money, I had the first suicide hotline in America. I went to Congress. I had Congressman Max Cleland, people that had brought me in to lobby. But when it came to them giving me money to run my hotline, the VA big boy said, oh, we do that. We do that. You don't need to do that or whatever. So a lot of it is just about being a warrior in the transition. Women vets need to have a mad woman, like I was called the madman at the VA and afterwards, to stay in here and organize and make things change. And I think the VA needs to listen about how you make it comfortable, primarily for women vets, to walk into that big white castle. Because when you sit inside of it, it looks like everything's beautiful, like looking out this window. Wow. But to come in there with PTSD for the first time, and probably have said, most of them that call us have had MST, to walk in and there's nothing but men there or whatever, that's a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer. I want one of the women or somebody to say, hey, you're coming in for service. I want them to walk me through. It's a simple thing. You hire one ombudsman to integrate and pass through that bureaucracy warmly first and then help them get started. Because once you get into the VA, there's some great-ass services. On this side of the wall of the VA is trying to get veterans to penetrate into the system to get their benefits and everything. And there are little simple things that the VA could do to make that easier. And once the flow goes, like if you had a separate place, you have a woman veteran or mental health person, enter them into the system. Once they get in, that'll gradually fade. Because I went through that with Vietnam vets. I mean, when I was hired right out of Vietnam to assess the largest VA that you're at, when it was Brentwood and whatever, there's just so much history. They want to know why in '71, why Vietnam vets weren't going to the VA. 335,000 Vietnam era veterans in this county in '71, 7% were going to that VA. That's why I got out. That's why I was brought out here, to find out why. And it was because the VA just wasn't ready for this. They were treating people like it was World War II, and the war was unpopular. We didn't win the war. We lost the war, but we didn't lose the battle. There was all this craziness going on. And I just injected myself into the city and helped navigate these men and a few women into the VA because I had carte blanche and because I was the golden boy at that time. They needed somebody because the VA was getting murdered in Life magazine and Time magazine. It's like, what are we going to do? So that's been sort of my history. But talking to Medal of Honor Jack Jacobs, I mean, he's right. We've got to hand this. So I'm handing this information out to anybody's ears. I've done it to Congress, but that's too far removed. There's got to be leadership to say, how can we make it easy? I'm telling you, once you get inside, there's services there and ever, but they don't realize it's getting through and getting comfortable and going after what you served your country for. I could go on forever. I've been in this for over a half a century.
So I'm going to shift gears just a tiny little bit. We touched just briefly on homeless issue. I think one of the people that could give us a little bit of insight into the homeless issue is Mr. Joe Leal. And what I want to ask you, sir, is this. We've had some discussions on the phone and whatnot. I think everybody's entitled to my opinion, so I love to give my opinions whenever I get the chance. What my opinion is, and I've done a little bit of research, and we talked and you confirmed it, but I want you to add to this. Here's what I'm going to tell everybody about homelessness. I've heard every single reason for homelessness that you could possibly come up with. Well, they got mental problems. Oh, they got drug problems. All that's true. Every bit of that's true for some people. But here's the one common denominator. There is one common denominator for all the homeless people throughout the entire nation. And I'm going to tell you what that is. It's the lack of affordable housing. It's that simple. That's the common thread. I don't care if you have a drug problem, you still have lack of affordable housing. I don't care if you got a mental problem. If you can't afford to stay at a place, you're going to be homeless. Really simple. Do you go out? You go out and you don't have to tell me about vet hunters, but you deal with homeless folks. And what I want you to know is, what do you think? What's the situation? What's the number one thing you're running into, Joe, when you encounter homeless people?
Well, the biggest thing that's always is red tape. We like to think of ourselves as running around with a bunch of scissors and just cutting through it. We're firm believers that we don't beat down the VA. We don't, because we're smart enough to know that they're going to have to get to the VA at one point. So we advocate. I have Vietnam vets that served back in the early 70s that refused to go to the VA because of one issue that they experienced back when they were trying to get in there. So we help change that. How do we do it? We lead by example. Now I'm going to tell you some of the obstacles we have to this day that's a shame. I have to my left, possibly your right, two of the most amazing veteran praxis members that help with that, but it gets aggravating. Because like you mentioned, they get a voucher, they can go through all the vetted system, right? I mean, they go through it all, it's not easy. When they get to that point, where's the housing, right? The other thing is, this is the part that really frustrates us. As you see this, both NCOs here, a couple NCOs here floating around there in uniform. If this guy was a reservist and he was active duty, you wouldn't be able to know. But a lot of times those titles alone keep these service members from getting the resources they need. I'll give you an example. I will have a female veteran with a child. We'll try to put them in housing, but guess what? Oh, I'm sorry, thanks for serving, but you were only in the reserve. You were only in the National Guard. You don't qualify for this or that. What are you talking about? This individual's homeless with children. Well, you're gonna have to go the civilian route. We have to get very creative on how to be able to serve to that point. We believe that if you're serving, look, when I first started Vet Hunters, here's how it happened. When we first started, nobody wanted to call us that. They felt it was very aggressive. They would call us vet finders. No, we're vet hunters. We're hunting these homeless vets. And the sad part about it was there were Korean vets, World War II vets, older vets dying on the same streets that they fought for. But what really took me for a loop was when I was in a battalion, because I'm still part of the Army, proudly, when I was in the battalion, I had a PFC. I'll never forget this guy. He tells me, hey, can you give me a ride to my home? No problem. He's in full uniform. I give him a ride to the Salvation Army Bell Shelter. Blew my mind. I was like, wait a minute, what am I doing at the Bell Shelter? This is where I stay. Couldn't figure it out. What? Like how? So then I started to do an internal audit within the Army Reserve, and I found out there's a lot of reservists that are battling it out. They're battling it out. Food insecurities, homelessness, unemployment, underemployed, you name it, it exists. But you wouldn't know it because the military builds great war fighters. We do great with that. But I gotta tell you, when you're a citizen soldier, you're expected to hold the standards of active duty, but you don't have those resources. I've always said this before, correct me if I'm wrong. If somebody calls me, they say that's not true, but I've always believed that there's no such thing as an active duty homeless Marine, soldier, airman, because they have all the resources right there. But in the reserve, we have to depend on our community. We have to depend on nonprofits. But then now you have a lot of nonprofits that have been around for many years that their finances are starting to dwindle because they've been supporting this like crazy. And that money's starting to leave, and now you're starting to have to get creative. So my point to that is that we really have to start figuring out a way to get these guardsmen and these reservists to be able to access. You know how embarrassing it is to have a reservist want to come and get education and they don't qualify for none of that, right? They have to get very creative. They want to attend these schools. You know how embarrassing it is too that you have somebody that's about 40-some years old that got out of the active duty, let's just say in 2005, but they weren't ready to utilize their education benefits at that point. But now that they want to use it and go to USC, for example, no, your window of opportunity to use your benefits is gone. Wait, what are you talking about? I wasn't ready to go to school then. Because when I got out, I didn't have a proper transition. I was trying to figure life out. And now that I got to this point and I'm ready to go to school, you're telling me I can't use my money? Why are you not? Why is there a time? Why is there a cap to that? That money should be lifelong. I should be able to go to school if I'm 70 years old, whenever I'm ready. So the point is, like you said earlier, there's still a lot. There's still a lot of things. The VA is doing a great job trying to do what they can with what they got. I understand that. And we're doing everything we can to bridge that gap. The other thing is there's some things that they can't do. It's not their fault when the reservist comes in and they don't qualify. It's not their fault. It's the way the system is. So like this wonderful young lady said that it's going to take females to change it. It's all going to take us veterans to lobby, to talk to our politicians, and so much to even become one so that we can change the system, like you mentioned over there. So when it comes to homelessness, you're 100% correct. I also believe, our team believes here, getting them into housing is not that easy, but that's when your work starts. It's the maintaining them in the housing. That's the true trick. A lot of these guys have been homeless for 30 years, and you're going to throw an apartment. Did you know that we have people housed, but they'd rather still sleep out on the streets, but they store all their stuff in their apartment? And you ask them, why are you doing that? You got a place to live. Why do you still? Oh, because that's my family out there. I feel guilty I have a place, and they don't. Last thing I'm going to share with you really briefly. We had a guy named Patrick. We did this bike ride a few times from East LA to DC. We rode bicycles. Sounds great up until you get on a bike and try it. Trust me, it was hard. But we did it. Bunch of Vietnam vets, all these guys mentored me. We went up there all in the name of homelessness, right? We're raising this documentary. We're doing all this to say no homeless veterans in period, right? Those two words should never exist. Homeless veteran, why, right? So in the process of doing that, we met a guy named Patrick. Long story short, his wife thought he was dead. 10 years, they thought he was dead. We found him in Vegas. Called his wife in Pahoa, Hawaii, and said, is your husband named Patrick? She said, yes. Your husband's alive? She said, nope, you're lying. He died 10 years ago. No, ma'am, I'm telling you, he's alive. We connected him, flew him back to Hawaii. My point to that is that this man was so disconnected from resources, because when you're out there for a week, 2 weeks, a month, to 3 years, something happens to you. You start to become disconnected. So it is all our responsibilities to go out there, because if you leave a homeless veteran out on the streets, the same thing as leaving somebody out there to die in the battlefield. You don't do that. You take a few minutes of your time and you try to help. And you try to do best you can, because those couple minutes that you do could change their lives forever. That being said, so yes, to your point, housing's a big issue. We're doing what we can, right? The stigma's kind of interesting. Oh, you're a veteran? Oh, you must be an alcoholic. You must be crazy. That's not true, but that's the stigma.
Thanks, Joe. We appreciate the insight. What that did is it opened the door, because you mentioned reserves, guard, that kind of thing. We just happen to have a couple people who might know a little something about that institution. I want to ask Command Sergeant Major Sam Uden, who happens to deal with some guard people from time to time, I'd say. Would you share with us what kind of issues you're seeing? You just heard what Joe had to say. Are you noticing any problems in your units with people because they're guard? Are they looked upon differently? That kind of thing. Could you share with us?
All right. Thank you, Greg. So I have an interesting perspective where I deal with the whole cycle of life in my role in the Army and also in my veteran work, from prenatal care all the way to burial. And some of the words that I'm hearing today, I think, are, if it's not the solution, it's part of the solution to every topic that we're going to discuss. One of them is collaboration, the other one is participation, and the other one is integration. What I have found is, first of all, we spend the time to take care of people, and we need to replicate the work we do and work together to do that. If we integrate the people, whether it be in the VA or in the military, they become part of something, and they become part of this system that takes care of them. Otherwise, they see it as a bureaucracy, and they're afraid to navigate it. But if you start them early and integrate them early the correct way, then they're going to be able to take advantage of the benefits that they're entitled to and have a happier, healthier life and be a more productive citizen. So the collaboration starts here. It's knowing who to reach out to, and that's the biggest thing for me is educating my soldiers on what resources are out there and to get creative, right? There's a lot of red tape. And if you're helping somebody, there's a way to break through that red tape that we all know how to do. So it's duplicating what we do and the people that we mentor to go out and help people and to focus on the people first. So that is the biggest thing is to collaborate with all of us to do that, and then to integrate and get them involved sooner rather than later. Because once they get out 10, 20 years later, they don't know how to get back in the system, right? So if you get them in there, I have 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds that join for education benefits. They've been in the Guard for a few years and don't know how to do it. When they land in the Brigade Sergeant Major's office, it's usually for a bad thing, but when they come into my office, I'm taking the time to sit there and walk them through those educational benefits and then training the people below me to get them in there. And when they're taking advantage of those educational benefits, guess what? They know how to use the system and use their benefits for other things, what they need to later, the VA, and health services. And then the other thing with that as well is that I lost my train of thought. But just getting them involved early. The veteran service organizations are having problems with veterans and relating to younger veterans. The earlier you get them involved and make them part of the team, because we're all part of this team when we served, is getting them involved in earlier. And then also, if they're an 18-year-old, 19-year-old, they have transferable skills. We're talking about not being able to integrate into the civilian world. If they led a detail to clean the latrines, they led a small team to accomplish a mission. And talking to them on how to translate that on their resumes, I had a 20-year-old top secret clearance GIS trained, and he didn't know how to write a resume, right? So I told him, hey, this is how you write your resume. You do all these things that any company would love to have a veteran like you in there. But it takes the time of people like us to have those conversations, to duplicate what we're doing in other people, because we're just one person, right? But everyone we touch, we multiply our impact times 1,000. So collaboration, participation, and integration, taking the time to walk somebody through the process, whatever it is going to make sure that everyone stays involved and we're taking care of veterans. Thank you. Sorry to go on.
Hallelujah.
Thank you, sir.
You're so right on. They need about 1,000 of you everywhere, because that is exactly. And it takes people like you to.
We got the right crew here, huh? People know some stuff. So what Sergeant Major Uden did is he opened the door for my next question. We're fortunate to have with us some people from veteran service organizations. As a matter of fact, I'm looking across the table there and I'm seeing Commander Jeff Daly from American Legion Post 43, Hollywood. That's one of the most active posts in the entire nation. They do more than just about any post I've ever encountered. Huge following, huge membership, everything. Sir, would you please share with us, tying into what some of the things that Sergeant Major was talking about, could you share with us what are the veteran service organizations like you and the American Legion doing to collaborate and to integrate those soldiers and airmen and Navy people, sailors? That's what they are.
They're sailors. Well, we tend to not integrate Army, but we're working on it. All right. Well, 43 has a unique story. We don't have time to go through it all. Before I got there, and no matter what I just said, know that I've only been in the American Legion about 5 years. Before I got there, it's an original post back 104 years, and it was capped at 500 members because the story was that some of the members thought, well, we can't have any more than that. Where would they park? We were worried about where they would park. And the reality was that they wanted to control who was there, because if you control who gets in, you control their loyalty, you control their votes, you control how things are run. That wasn't conducive to attracting younger members anyway, but a few of them snuck in, and they used this crazy method of emailing each other, where they could email each other and get their votes together. Then they got a couple of seats on the board. Then they got people in positions of being officers. And then they started to grow. And when they started to grow, they got press coverage. And I can tell you this right now, if you want to reach people, you have to do it on different levels. You have to have boots on the ground, as I call it. You got to be out there and you got to talk to people. You got to have close air support, being at events, being visible, being out there doing things, because people want to assimilate with action of all ages. But we see now in younger people, they always want to be a part of something that is doing good. And we also know the DNA of veterans and military people is they want to be a part of something bigger than themselves. So we started becoming that. And it eclipsed that little coup, if you want to call it that, eclipsed with a Wall Street Journal article. A Wall Street Journal article came out and gave us the PR that you just can't buy. I mean, I think one of the quotes was, it's the hottest membership group in Hollywood that you can't buy your way into. You had to earn your way into it. You still have to pay dues, so it's a little confusing. But our dues are, if anybody's interested, our dues are just the per capita of $33.50 a year. It's ridiculous. So what we do now is that we're continuing to try to serve. I don't really like the question of what's in it for me, what am I going to get? I'm more interested in what are you going to provide to your community, state, and nation. Then what we're doing is extracting from the DNA of being part of something bigger than yourself. And when you do that, you're going to attract a lot of other people because people want to join things that they admire and like. And as you were talking about earlier about getting on social media, we're huge on social media. I like to say if you do something and you don't talk about it, did you actually do it to its full extent? If we are feeding people, if we were cleaning up a park, if all you did was clean up that park, you just cleaned up one park. If you tell people you cleaned up that park, other people are going to clean up parks where they live. And then you've magnified your impact. And when you magnify your impact, people always trace it back to you. And then they come and they join us. Unlike other American Legion posts and VSOs, one of the things we don't talk about a lot is membership. Because everything we do attracts members. So if you're sitting around going, how do we attract women? How do we attract minorities? How do we attract young people? How do we attract left-handed, short-sighted people who didn't shoot right, but they managed to get through boot camp? How do you connect with all of them? You connect with all of them. And what we do is, I like to think of veterans as a minority group. And within that minority group, we have other minority groups, but together, we need to speak in a unified voice. And I encourage everyone to get on things like Voter Voice. If you're in the Legion or an ally, you can go to legion.org/action, and you'll go right to our Voter Voice where you see the legislative things that are happening. You can click and get to all of your elected leaders and try to get some of this legislative stuff done. Get through that red tape the right way and the proper way through that system, because it is really frustrating. My post life is pretty easy. I mean, we have drama. We have 1,300 members now, so we have our internal drama in politics. But when I get out and I see what the things that we should be doing and could be doing, it's really frustrating. I want like 13,000, and I'm headed there next.
Thank you, sir.
Yep.
I appreciate you sharing that. We're getting short on time, but I have 2 more questions I want to ask. The first one I want to ask is to National Commander Nelson Mellitz. And what the situation here is this. I told you that we're going to discuss a little bit about minority veterans. One of the minorities I told you we would discuss is the Jewish population. Here in Los Angeles, we have a very large Jewish population. From the day that I set foot in Los Angeles in 1958 till today, I've never not seen a time when there wasn't anti-Semitism. I've never not seen a time when synagogues weren't being defaced. I've never not seen a time when Jews were getting mugged in the streets. I've never not seen a time when bricks were being thrown through windows down on Fairfax. It's always been happening. It's happening everywhere, and as a matter of fact, right now, if we look at the statistics, it turns out that the most hate crimes that we notice are directed toward the Jewish population. I would like to ask Commander Nelson Mellitz, who might know a little bit something about that, National Commander of the Jewish War Veterans. One of their missions is anti-Semitism, fighting it, but fighting bigotry in every field, not just Jewish. We fight it everywhere. Sir, would you like to elaborate on that just a little bit, please? And appreciate it.
Thank you. And let me also elaborate on some of the questions going around and statements going around. The major veterans services organizations, in fact, 32 of us, belong to the Military Coalition. It's a coalition of organizations